I woke up to an unfamiliar silence. At first, I thought it was just one of those rare mornings when the world feels still, like time is taking a breath. But then my hand reached for her side of the bed, and it was cold, the sheets untouched. My wife, Emily, was an early riser sometimes, but never without a reason. She'd always leave the faint smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen or the sound of water running in the bathroom. This morning, there was nothing. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and called her name. No answer. My chest tightened, and I told myself not to overthink it. She might have gone for a walk, or maybe to the store. But as I got out of bed, something about the air felt different. It wasn't just quiet. It was empty. I went into the kitchen and immediately noticed the absence of her purse on the counter, the one she always left in the same spot. The coffee machine was cold. No cup waiting for me like there usually was. Then I saw it. An envelope, right in the center of the table, with my name written in her neat handwriting. My heart skipped. I picked it up, hesitating for a few seconds, part of me afraid of what it might say. The paper inside was folded twice, and as I opened it, my hand shook. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." That was it. No explanation, no details, just that one sentence. I read it over and over, my brain refusing to process it. Can't do what anymore? Be married to me? Live here? Love me? It didn't make sense. I dropped the letter on the table and grabbed my phone. I called her, straight to voicemail. I texted asking where she was, telling her I was worried. No reply. I checked the bedroom again, opening drawers, the closet. Half her clothes were gone. The space where her shoes should be was half empty. The jewelry box she kept on the dresser was gone entirely. I couldn't remember the last time we'd argued. We had our disagreements like any couple, but nothing serious enough to explain this. I thought back to the last evening we spent together. We had dinner, chicken stir-fry she made while we talked about our plans for the weekend. She laughed at something I said. She kissed me goodnight. And now she was gone. I started pacing, my mind spiraling. Did something happen to her? Was she in trouble? Or had she planned this? I tried calling her sister. She picked up, sounding confused. No, she hadn't heard from Emily. No, she didn't know about any problems. Her voice turned cautious, asking me if we'd been fighting. I told her no. She paused and said, "I'll try to call her." Before hanging up, I stood there in the kitchen, staring at the letter like it might change if I looked long enough. But the words stayed the same, small and final. I didn't know whether to call the police or wait, because what if she left by choice? I thought about the look in her eyes lately, those moments when she seemed far away even while sitting right next to me. I'd noticed it but didn't press. Maybe I should have. Now I couldn't stop wondering if I'd missed signs, if this wasn't sudden at all but something she'd been planning quietly. The silence in the house was suffocating. Every sound I made seemed too loud, like I was the only living thing left here. I sat at the table for hours, just holding my phone, waiting for it to ring, telling myself she'd walk through the door any minute, but deep down, I already knew that wasn't going to happen. By the afternoon, I had called her phone at least 30 times. Each time, it went straight to voicemail, and I kept leaving messages I knew she wasn't listening to. I tried her friends, but most of them said they hadn't spoken to her in weeks. A couple sounded surprised, even concerned, asking if everything was okay between us. I gave the same answer every time. I thought so. I didn't know how else to put it. Around 3 p.m., I finally called the police. I explained she'd left a note, that her things were missing, and that she wasn't answering her phone. The officer's tone was calm, almost rehearsed. He told me that because she was an adult and there was no sign of foul play, they couldn't file a missing person report yet. He said sometimes people just need space. That phrase, "just need space," hit me like a slap. Space from what? From me? I hung up feeling even more helpless. I went through our bank account, something I'd never done without her before. 3 withdrawals caught my eye,
Small amounts from an ATM 2 towns over, all within the last week. One was from the day before she left. I didn't recognize the area, and Emily didn't drive far without telling me. My stomach twisted. I decided to drive there. It was a rundown strip of stores, a laundromat, a small cafe, and a bus station. I parked and sat there for a while, scanning faces, half expecting her to suddenly appear. She didn't. I went inside the cafe, showed the barista a photo of her, and asked if they'd seen her. The girl hesitated before shaking her head. I could tell she was lying, but I didn't push. Back at home, I checked our shared laptop. Her browser history had been cleared completely, which was strange, because Emily wasn't the type to hide what she looked at. I dug through the recycling bin on the computer and found fragments of searches from a few days ago. Things like bus routes to other states and short-term rentals. My heart sank. She was planning this. I didn't know whether to be angry or heartbroken. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining her in a cheap motel room, her phone turned off, trying not to think about me. In the morning, I called her mom. She sounded more shocked than anyone so far. She asked me if I'd cheated on Emily. The question made me freeze. No, I told her, never. But the fact she even asked made me wonder if Emily had been telling people something. The next day, I went back to the bus station. I asked the ticket clerk if they could check recent purchases. He shook his head, said he couldn't give out that kind of information. I offered him cash. He refused. But as I was leaving, a woman in line touched my arm and whispered that she'd seen Emily there 2 mornings ago, boarding a bus heading south. She said Emily looked upset but determined, like she was running from something. My mind wouldn't stop replaying that. Running from something. What was she running from? Me? Our marriage? Herself? I drove home with that thought gnawing at me. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered so fast my voice cracked. But it wasn't Emily. It was a man's voice, low and unfamiliar, saying, "Stop looking for her. She's fine." Before I could ask anything, he hung up. I stared at the phone, my pulse thundering in my ears. My first instinct was to call back, but the number was blocked. Now it wasn't just confusion. It was fear. Someone else was involved. Someone who knew where she was, maybe even why she left. And they didn't want me to find her.
I didn't tell the police about the call right away. Something in the man's voice told me it wouldn't matter. He hadn't threatened me directly, and all they'd say was that it could be a prank. But I knew it wasn't a prank. There was a weight in those words, the kind that only comes from someone who means what they're saying. I spent that night replaying every moment of the last month with Emily, searching for signs I'd missed. I remembered how she'd been more protective of her phone, how she'd go outside to take certain calls, how she'd suddenly start running errands alone. At the time, I chalked it up to stress or wanting personal space. But now it felt deliberate. The next morning, I checked our credit card statements. One charge stood out. 3 nights at a motel on the edge of town about 2 weeks ago. I drove there immediately. The place was dingy, with faded paint and a cracked sign. The woman at the front desk barely looked up when I asked about Emily, until I showed her the photo. Her eyes flickered. Then she said Emily had stayed there with a friend and paid in cash for some nights, card for others. I asked what the friend looked like. She said it was a man, older than me, maybe mid-40s, with short dark hair and a beard. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear her after that. When I asked if they seemed close, she gave a little shrug and said they weren't here for sightseeing. I drove away in a daze, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly they hurt. Was she having an affair? The thought made me feel sick, but the pieces were starting to fit in ways I didn't want them to. Later that day, I called her best friend, Sarah. She had been distant on the phone the first time I reached out, but this time I pressed harder. After a long silence, Sarah admitted she'd known Emily had been unhappy for a while, but claimed she didn't know details. When I told her about the motel and the man, she sighed and said, "I think you should stop digging. She made her choice. That phrase, she made her choice, echoed in my head for hours. That night, I got another call from a blocked number. This time, I let it go to voicemail, but there was no message, just silence and faint background noise, like cars passing. I started to wonder if someone was watching me. I checked the locks twice before going to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. In the morning, there was an envelope under my front door. No return address, no name, just my first name in messy handwriting. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Emily sitting at an outdoor cafe, smiling at the man with the beard. They were leaning toward each other, his hand over hers on the table. The photo looked recent. My stomach felt like it was turning inside out. I flipped it over. There was a date written in pen from 4 days ago, which meant this was after she left me. She hadn't vanished to find herself or to take space. She'd gone to be with him. But that didn't explain the call telling me to stop looking or why she hadn't just asked for a divorce. I drove to the cafe from the photo. The waitress remembered them and said they seemed deep in conversation. But when I asked if she knew the man, she shook her head. As I was leaving, I noticed a car parked across the street that had been there the last time I came into town. Same dent on the front bumper, same cracked side mirror. The driver was pretending to read a newspaper, but his eyes flicked up at me. My gut told me he wasn't just some random guy. I got in my car, drove around the block, and when I came back, the car was gone. That night, I finally decided I couldn't do this alone anymore. If Emily didn't want me to find her, fine. But I needed to know why she left and who this man was. I picked up my phone and called a private investigator.
The private investigator's name was Mark. His voice was steady, professional, and he didn't waste time with small talk. I told him everything about Emily leaving, the motel, the man with the beard, the photograph, and the strange calls. He listened without interrupting, just asking for details when necessary. By the end of the conversation, he said, "Give me 3 days. Don't tell anyone you've hired me." Something about the way he said it made me realize he'd already decided this wasn't a normal missing person job. The next 3 days were unbearable. I jumped every time my phone buzzed, kept checking outside for that dented car, and barely slept. On the morning of the 4th day, Mark called and told me to meet him at a small diner off the highway. When I got there, he was sitting in a booth with a manila folder in front of him. He slid it over to me without a word. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Emily walking into an apartment building with the bearded man, Emily getting into his car late at night, the two of them at a grocery store, looking like a couple who had been together for years. But there was more. Photos of the man with other people, some of them looking shady. One picture showed him in what looked like a heated conversation with 2 guys outside a warehouse. Mark finally spoke. The man's name is Daniel Cross. He's not just some fling. He has a record. Fraud, assault, suspected involvement in a trafficking ring. Never convicted for the big stuff, but he's dangerous. My throat went dry. So why is Emily with him? Mark leaned back. That's the question. People don't just end up with someone like him by accident. I think she's involved in something she can't easily walk away from. I told him about the warning call. He nodded slowly. Then they know you're looking, and that means they're watching you. I felt a cold wave run through me. What do we do? I asked. Mark's eyes hardened. We find out where they are and what's keeping her there. But you need to prepare yourself. You might not like the answer. That night, I sat in my dark living room, staring at the folder of photos. Emily's smile in those pictures wasn't the same as the one she used to give me. It was tighter, forced in some, and in others, her eyes looked distant, almost fearful. Was she there willingly, or was she trapped? The next day, Mark called with an address. They're staying at a safe house outside the city. It's heavily watched. I can get you close, but if you go alone, you could get hurt. My pulse quickened. I didn't care about the danger. I needed to see her. We drove out that night, parking about a block away. The safe house was an old 2-story building with boarded-up windows and a chain-link fence. Through binoculars, I saw her. Emily. She was on the porch, smoking, her hair tied back, wearing a sweatshirt I didn't recognize. She looked thinner, tired, older somehow. The man came out behind her, putting a hand on her shoulder. She flinched, just barely, but enough for me to see it. My chest tightened. Mark whispered, "That's not a woman in love." We stayed there for another hour, watching. Cars came and went, people I didn't recognize. The place wasn't just a home. It was a base of operations. Eventually, they went inside and the lights went out. Mark turned to me. "We can't storm in there. If you want her back, we need to be smart. I have contacts who can help, but once we start, there's no going back." I nodded, my jaw clenched. For the first time since she disappeared, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel before. Not just worry or heartbreak, but a deep, burning anger. Whatever was going on, whoever this man was to her, I was going to find out, and I was going to bring her home.
Mark's contacts turned out to be two men who didn't exactly look like they worked in an office. Scarred knuckles, faded tattoos, and a way of scanning every street like they expected trouble. They weren't police, but they knew how to handle dangerous people. The plan was simple on paper. Catch Emily alone, get her away from the safe house, and find out the truth before Daniel Cross or his people noticed. Simple, but risky. We spent 2 more days watching the building, learning routines. Every morning around 8, Emily would walk to a small convenience store a block away, always alone, always back in 10 minutes. On the 3rd morning, we moved. Mark parked his car near the corner, engine running. I waited across the street with one of his guys, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then I saw her. Emily stepped out, hood up, hands in her sweatshirt pocket. She looked pale in the weak morning light. I crossed the street before she saw me, and when she did, she froze. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "We need to talk," I said. "Please, just come with me." She shook her head violently. "No, you don't understand. You shouldn't be here. He'll—" A car door slammed somewhere behind us, and her eyes went wide. Mark's guy stepped in, gently but firmly guiding her toward the corner. She resisted for a second, but when I grabbed her hand and said, "It's me, Emily, please," she let herself be pulled along. We were in the car and moving before I could even breathe. For the first few minutes, she sat in silence, staring out the window. Finally, she said, "You shouldn't have done this. Now they'll come after you too." I told her I didn't care, that I needed to know why she left, who Daniel Cross really was, and why she hadn't come home. She rubbed her face, her voice breaking. "It started as something stupid. I met him through a friend, thought I could make some quick money helping him with business, but it wasn't business. It was dangerous. And when I tried to back out, he wouldn't let me. He said he'd hurt you if I left. He said he had people who could make you disappear." Her hands were shaking. "I stayed because I thought it would keep you safe." The pieces started to fit together. The motel, the phone calls, the warning. It wasn't an affair. It was something darker. I asked why she never told me. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Because I didn't want you to get pulled into this. But now it's too late." Mark pulled into a safe location, an abandoned workshop his friends controlled. Inside, Emily finally let herself break down, and I held her for the first time in weeks. Mark made a call to someone he trusted in law enforcement, the kind of person who could move quietly without tipping Daniel off. By nightfall, a small team had surrounded the safe house. We watched from a distance as unmarked vehicles rolled in. It wasn't a shootout, but it wasn't quiet either. Shouts, banging doors, and the sound of someone being taken down hard. By midnight, Daniel Cross was in custody along with several of his men. The charges, extortion, trafficking, and fraud, were enough to put him away for a long time. When it was over, we drove home. Emily was exhausted, leaning against the window, eyes half closed. She kept apologizing, but I told her it didn't matter. What mattered was that she was safe and that whatever this nightmare had been, it was over. The next morning, sunlight poured into our kitchen for the first time in what felt like forever. Emily sat across from me with a cup of coffee, her hands still trembling slightly, but she smiled. A real smile this time. I knew things wouldn't just go back to normal overnight. There were wounds, secrets, and scars we'd have to work through. But she was here, and for the first time since the day she disappeared, I believed we might actually make it.